8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Project Egg Show. I'm your host, Ben Gothard, and today we're back in New Orleans. Woo woo! Who dat? That's what I'm talking about. We've been traveling for the past month, and today we are finally back in New Orleans, and very gratefully in my father's office here. So shout out to you, Dad. Thank you so much for the space. You rock. Now today, we have the honor of speaking with Scott Marshall, a gentleman who is an expert in raw food diets for dogs, also known as a total certified badass. Scott, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. And I do have that official certification. I've got it over here on the wall. You can check my credentials if you would like.
Awesome. So, Scott, we've known each other for probably, definitely over a year, maybe even close to 2 years now.
Yeah.
And it has just been such an honor to have known you for that long and to see your meteoric rise like this and to finally be able to get you on the show. I know how busy you are, and to be able to talk about it, I'm so incredibly excited. So let's jump right in. And I want to know, what is your story?
Now, I've seen you ask people this before, so I'm pretty sure I already know how you're going to respond. But what part do you want to know? Because there's all kinds of the facets, right? So where should we focus on?
All of it.
All of it. That's pretty much what I was expecting. All right. So I grew up here where I'm at right now in Utah. Spent, again, most of my life here. Did a little bit of traveling as soon as I turned 18 because I was feeling slightly oppressed by certain factors that occur here in Utah. And so I was like, I'm out. I basically graduated high school on a Tuesday, had my last day at my job at the time on a Thursday, and woke up, 3,000 miles away at a summer job on Saturday morning. So I was just like, peace, I'm out. And worked for 3 years, or 3 different summers, I should say, remotely out in Alaska, which was absolutely life-changing. Realized that Utah was not so bad, especially after doing that and spending a summer, not a full summer, but a few weeks out in Wyoming doing the same thing essentially, and came back and just started working and, doing what people do. I had zero interest whatsoever in going to college. It just never felt right. Like from the offset, 16, 17 years old, it was just like, no, like, I don't know why. I can't tell you why. I know it's what you're supposed to do, blah, blah, blah. But it was just no. It was always a no for me. Like, even if money was a huge concern in my family, we grew up on food stamps and state assisted living and all these things. And so the money was obviously a factor there, but it just didn't seem appealing to me either. And maybe there's some kind of subconscious, like it was out of reach. And so I made myself not want it. I don't know, but it just never appealed to me. And so I just got jobs and started working, did everything from, call center jobs to physical labor jobs to crazy jobs where I worked in microchip wafer creation plants where there's, 1/millionth the amount of bacteria that there are in surgery rooms. And I mean, just some insane jobs. And eventually ended up coming to this video on YouTube of a guy you've actually had on the podcast before. I almost said the channel because I'm so used to YouTube, but you've had on the podcast Dion Bainey, and he was talking about how he was, going to do his taxes for his Kindle business. And at the time I had just gone through a huge personal transformation where I kind of got fed up with my health and ended up losing like 60 pounds and started looking at the rest of my life where I was like, okay, I feel so much better. This part of my life is so much better. How can I make everything else better too? Just basically got obsessed with the self-improvement bug, if you want to call it that. And that, of course, came back to money. I was working for a company that I absolutely loved and I'll never say a bad thing about them, even though they ended up laying me off with tons of other people at the end of 2018. But it was an amazing company to work for, changed my life, taught me so many skills that I use to today. But I knew like that wasn't where I wanted to be either, because I was making really good money, but it was just monotonous, blah, dead end stuff. Like there's no growth opportunity. And to be completely honest, I was at a stage where I climbed high enough in the organization where I'd essentially almost doubled my salary from what I started with, but I didn't want any more responsibility. I didn't want to deal with any more people, and it was just not, I don't know, it just wasn't for me. I knew I didn't want to be there forever. And this whole transformation happened, the 60 pounds thing. And I came across this video and was like, well, I can do this. All you have to do is put out a book on this and a book on that, and you can make $10,000 a month. And I was like, okay, well, I'm doing this. Well, it didn't work out like that. I did end up meeting D1, virtually. And I did end up publishing books through a man that I met because of D1, that we both also know and has also been on the podcast, named Dale. And I spent the first parts of, and this is part of living in the country, flies, you can't get rid of them, cows, horses, everything. But I ended up spending 2016 publishing books that I cared absolutely zero about. It was about gluten-free fitness, because I basically just said, what do I know enough about that I can put into a book? And that was gluten-free stuff, because I have to, not California yoga mom gluten-free, but I have to be gluten-free because of actual allergy issues. So I started writing books about that. They never went anywhere. And I had a conversation with D1 one time with some of his mentees, and he was like, dude, like, why are you not doing raw food stuff for dogs? Like, you obviously give zero craps about your gluten-free thing, and all you talk about is your dogs and the way that you feed them. Why is this not your business? Like, if you had, because he was getting ready to switch his dog over to raw food. It's like, if you had $100 course for raw feeding right now, I would send you $100. And that was basically like the turning point. And, fast forward 2 years and here I am. I have that course. I have, a best-selling book on Amazon on the same topic. I have a massive community of, 24 and a half, almost 1,000 people, YouTube channel, boot camp that I'm starting in July. Well, it's now July, that I'm starting sometime this month. And it's just been a crazy last 3 years. The first year was absolute suck factor of learning and not knowing anything, to finally feeling like something was going right a year in. And now 2 years after that, and now it just feels like things are starting to work. So I don't know. But that's where we're at. That's high school to sitting here with Ben.
And that is an amazing journey. Amazing, amazing journey. I want to talk about when you were younger and when you went to Alaska. What was that like, and what did you do?
So it was for seasonal work for a cruise company. So I don't think naming the company is a bad thing, but it was Princess Cruises, and they're one of the bigger ones. And they have all these wilderness lodges that they do in Alaska where, you do your X amount of days in the ship and your X amount of days on land. And your land stuff is basically going sightseeing and checking out all these lodges, wilderness lodges that they call them, that are literally in the middle of nowhere. And I ended up going out there because, and this is another one of those turning point things, we talked about those right before we started the stream, but one of the turning points for my life was going to a brunch at a Flying J with my family, which is basically just like a trucker stop. I don't know if you guys have those, but where my cousin had actually worked for them and suggested that I check it out. And so I was like, boom, this is for me. And that's really where it all started, because that's where I came out of my shell and kind of came into my own, because I was literally on my own. It's not like, you live 30 minutes from mom and dad anymore. It's like, no, dude, you're not even like, you're on the same landmass, but you have to travel through either a plane or through a different country to get here. Like, mom and dad can't help you. And so it was a huge turning point for me. And I did what was called, I've never heard this term anywhere else, so I don't know if they made it up themselves or what, but it was called houseman. And basically what we would do is we would drive around in a Jeep that was pulling this teeny tiny little trailer behind us that was basically only as wide as the walking paths, because we would drive on the walking paths. And we would, in the mornings, go through all the different rooms and rip all the dirty linens out of the rooms and put them into bags and bring them to the laundry people. And the laundry people would clean all that stuff. In the second half of our day, we would restock the closets with clean linens for the housekeepers to use to make the rooms up the next day. And it was some of the most fun I've ever had in my life. Like, it sounds like a terrible job where you're like, dealing with people's dirty laundry and everything, but it was crazy amounts of freedom. You're driving around in a Jeep all day long, like you're hanging out with your buddies, you're always out in the fresh air, and you're in this amazing, beautiful setting. I mean, when I say the middle of nowhere, I mean the closest anything civilization was an hour away, and it was a single street town. One street. That was it. There's a couple of houses out in the trees, and other than that, it was one street with a couple different restaurants and a bookstore. Like, that was it. And that was the closest thing to civilization. It was an hour away. Then you had to go 3 hours away to get to sort of real civilization, where they had a Walmart and everything else, and 4 hours away to get to Anchorage, where there was an actual airport and all that stuff. But you would get to the high points on property. That's what we called it, was property, because there was literally like if you go outside of this line, you're in the middle of nowhere, the wilderness, you will get lost, don't leave. And if you get to the high points on property, in every single direction, no matter what direction you look, for as far as you can see, it's nothing but 30, 40 foot tall pine trees. It's like a green carpet as far as you can see. Like, if you go outside of property and you don't know exactly where you're at, you're done. Like, you're lost, and we can't find you. There's too much. It was insane.
That is amazing. That is amazing. So you were just out there in basically the wilderness, driving around on Jeeps, getting to explore nature and like be there on your own for the very first time.
Yeah, man. And we did the kind of, I don't know, adventurous, but at the same time risky thing. Don't do these things without other people. But on one of the points outside of property, they had what they called the Boy Scout Trail. Because there was this one jut off where they always take like Boy Scouts and stuff hiking. But there was this other way that you could take that no one knew where it went. At least no one that was working there at the time knew where it went. And so me and 7 or 8 other people one day on one of our days off, because you got one day off a week, and we were like, all right, we're going to find out where this thing goes. So, we packed up water, we packed up some food, we packed up adult beverages, and decided we're going to go and find out where this thing goes, at least as far as we can go before we're like, okay, either the trail is gone and we don't know where we're going anymore and we're going to get lost, or we find something cool. And we kind of found a little of both, but we ended up, it was like, I don't know, almost serendipitous in a way. We end up at this completely still, crystal glass looking lake. And some crazy, awesome, amazing souls have hiked out 2 kayaks with multiple paddles and then just left them there for whoever was crazy enough to find this lake. And so we get there, there's these kayaks with, they weren't even kayaks, they were like little mini boats. You could fit 3 or 4 people in them. And we just paddled out into the middle of this lake and was just like, this is life right now. We were literally out in the middle of nowhere in Alaska, hanging out with friends, making a little bit of money, seeing new stuff. And how cool is this? We found random boats in this random lake in the middle of nowhere that probably, less than 100 people have ever seen, because it was an extensive effort to get there, and kind of a scary, dangerous effort, running into bears and all kinds of stuff. So it was again, it was insane. The Alaska trip was a huge turning point for me in just about every way.
That is incredible. And I love nature so much so that, whenever I go to a new place, the first thing I do is I look for trails to go explore. I cannot imagine how cool that must have been to be in virtually uncharted territories where if you take a wrong turn, like you are in the wilderness and there are definitely humongous bears and other creatures that will definitely eat you. Like that must
Oh
have been
yeah.
insane.
And the animal life was completely different than, I don't know, if you're in like a normal hiking area, like this is the trail and literally tens of thousands of people have been on this trail, and you never see anything other than birds because all the animals stay away and they're cautious of people. Like that was the most dangerous part of the wildlife, is the vast majority of them had never seen people, and so they had no apprehension about getting close and checking them out. Like the bears would just come up and be like, "What's up, bro?" And you're like, "No, you stay away, you stay over there, like it's cool." I mean, these little ninja vole things, they'd like these teeny tiny little creatures where you like put a piece of chocolate down and they'd get an inch away from the chocolate and they'd do this crazy backflip thing and run back in the bushes, and 10 seconds later repeat. And I mean, the wildlife had no apprehension of people. They were like, "I have no idea what you are, I've never seen you, I have no reason to be afraid of you." It's crazy getting into places like that, out into the Wyoming place, hand feeding fox with her kits, and it was getting into those kinds of places is a whole different experience when it comes to wildlife. Like this fox acted like my own little dog. Like I would walk out my front door and this fox would be like sitting here outside of my door, and then later in the day I would hand feed her fries that she would take over to her kits and pieces of hamburger that she would take over to her kits. I mean, wildlife is insane when you get into these more isolated areas.
That's amazing. So before that, you said you came out of your shell. Before that, I mean, were you shy and kind of reserved?
Oh, dude, totally. I mean, like I had my social circle that I was super like that with, like super open with, but to the rest of the world, it was just, leave me alone. I don't care. I have no interest in getting to know you, anything like that. And once you go through that experience where you're meeting from people from everywhere across the US, places in Asia, places in, Bulgaria, Slovakia, all kinds of European countries. I mean, you either just go into social shutdown mode, which is what a lot of people unfortunately did, and they just stay in their dorm, essentially is what they are, their dorm all the time, or you get social really quick. And you get to learn how to hear about how other people do things. Like it's when you live in one place forever and you don't experience how anybody else does anything other places, it really throws you off balance when people react completely differently to something than you would. I don't have a good way to express this or have a good example or something, but well, I guess this is one weird example where the people in Europe were super upset, a lot of them, because they would come over and they'd be like 19, 20, and they couldn't buy alcohol. And they're like, "What do you mean I can't buy alcohol? I've been able to buy alcohol for the last like 3 years since they were 18. I'm like, "Well, sorry, dude, you can't hear." Like, that's just a really silly example, but that's really interesting talking to people from different places and hearing just how different life is. I mean, like prom pictures that are super crazy and the kids are doing super insane things and they're like 16, 17 years old. Where like, if you saw somebody that was 25 here in the US doing that, you'd be like, "Whoa, should this picture be being shown on the internet?" I mean, like all kinds of different stuff. But yeah, I was a lot more reserved when I wasn't in my tight social circles, and Alaska just took that shell and absolutely destroyed it because you can't have, you either go into social shutdown mode and you spend all your time in your dorm, or you come out of that shell really quick because you can't socially survive inside of it, between talking to your fellow employees that are from all over the world, or the guests. That was a whole other thing, talking to guests that are from different places. Maybe they don't even really speak English that well, if at all, and they're just like trying to ask questions by pointing at things. And I mean, it's like you have to get a lot more socially comfortable and figure out different and better alternative ways to communicate.
I love that. So when you then moved on from that Alaska situation, I guess, or that period of your life, why did you decide to go on to where you did? How did you make that decision?
Honestly, what it ended up being was every job that I had, because this Alaska thing was only summertime because it was seasonal, because outside of the timeframes that they were open, you couldn't get there because there was too much of a risk of there being several feet of snow overnight, not inches, but several feet. And like they would have pictures and stuff of people snowboarding off the roof in wintertime on property because that's how high the snow was. And so for that period of time, for those 3 years, any job that I got was just, what job can I have for the next 8 or 9 months while I wait for Alaska again? And it got to a point where life honestly just kind of sucked because I didn't have any permanent direction of like, where am I going? What am I doing? I didn't go to college. I don't want to go to college. Super pessimistic attitude towards life in general, just whatever, I don't care. And it got to the point where I essentially gave up, in the sense of, I'm not going to try to do much of anything. Like I went completely hippie style. Like I went barefoot for years. Like everywhere that the only places that I wore shoes was where I absolutely had to, where like I couldn't get in without them. And even then I'd try to get away with just wearing socks. To where I was like, okay, I'm essentially giving up on life. I'm quitting my job at the call center that I'm at right now, and I am going to move out to Kauai, where my brother lives right now and is essentially homeless, and we're just going to live on the beach and be professional beach bums. I put in my 2 weeks at my job. I sourced out, whatever you want to call it, had somebody take over my part of the lease, the rental place that I was at with a buddy of mine. I either sold stuff or stored stuff that I didn't want to sell. And I mean, everything, like I was going, my plane ticket was bought, my one-way ticket. And I had a going away party and was essentially looking to have some fun before I left. So we threw this big going away party, invited a specific girl. Long story short, and this is one of those, the universe is weird things. My brother was on a hike of some kind where the only way to get in and out of it is a bridge. And they had a crazy storm on the island and it took the bridge out. And so he's basically just stuck on the other side of this thing for over a week. So I'm getting really freaked out because I'm supposed to be going out there. I have no idea where to meet him, if he's going to meet me, and I can't get a hold of him because he's in the middle of nowhere. Obviously, his cell phone is dead. I don't even think he had one, actually. And so I got really apprehensive about going because, like, I'm adventurous, but I'm not going to fly out to Kauai with nobody there to pick me up, no direction of where to go. I don't know where you live. I don't know where to meet you. Like, that for me is too many question marks. And so I ended up not going. And the girl that I invited to that going away party ended up being my wife. Now is my wife. And for a really, really long time, it was just have a job that can pay the bills, and I ended up finding this job that I really liked that I talked about earlier, but really life just got sucky. It was like, all that I do is go to work so that I can pay the bills. And then I come home and do nothing because I have no direction, ended up gaining all that weight and life just sucked, and got really angry at life and realized that I was so angry all the time because I wasn't happy with where life was at. And I knew that I could do more stuff. And it was just manifesting itself that way, where I was angry all the time because I was mad at myself for not doing anything with my life. And that's what led to the weight loss, which then snowballed into everything else of, there is so much more out there. And I've already tried the give up on life thing. And the universe said, no, don't go that way. And it really just snowballed from the whole weight loss thing of making the realization of I'm unhappy because, and I'm unhappy and I'm angry at life because I'm not doing anything with my life. And I know that I can. Like, I'm not a super smart person and I'm not a super intelligent or talented or anything like that person. But I was like, I can do more than what I'm doing right now. And I'm either, and this is kind of going dark with it, but I'm either going to change and do things with my life, or I'm going to slowly or not so slowly, not suicide, but slowly or not so slowly end up killing myself, whether it's, you know, diabetes or a heart attack from stress and poor diet and weight and all these different things, or who knows what. And it was almost like a switch. And the big weight loss thing was a huge catalyst because, I mean, I don't know if anybody out there has tried, but 60 pounds is an insane amount of weight to lose. And it doesn't happen overnight, and it takes months and months and months and months of consistent work. And that's what really taught me over time, if you put work into things, it works and stuff happens. So, and again, at the end of that journey is when I found that D1 Baney video with the Kindle stuff, and that led me to Dale, which led me back to D1. Fast forward again 2-3 years, and now I'm working in a professional, mentee capacity with D1, where I've actually hired him as a business coach, and life is insanely different than it was 10 years ago. 21-year-old Scott and 31-year-old Scott, totally different people. 10 years ago, I was turning 21 in Alaska. The last year that I was there, going, I have no idea what I'm doing with my life, to I know 100% exactly what I'm doing with my life, and no one's going to change my mind.
That's amazing. So I want to talk about that shift, because to me, what is so critical and essential in order to make that shift is pain.
Oh, yeah.
I really think it takes a lot of pain to force somebody to change.
Yes.
So can you talk about what it actually felt like at that critical moment? And I know you described it, and I appreciate the detail you went into, but I really want to focus in on, like, how did it feel at that critical apex right before that switch?
Basically, it was, just everything was bad, was the mindset. And I completely agree on the pain thing, because even now today, I will tell you, and I wish that it wasn't this way, but I wish that I could use, not hindsight, but what's the opposite of hindsight? I wish that I could look at things and say, if I don't do this, this will happen, and take extensive action because of that. But unfortunately, that's just not how I'm wired. I'm 100% one of those pain equals change people. And I think that a lot of people are that way. And for the majority of the human race, I think that's the case, is that you don't change unless things are painful. And another unfortunate / beneficial at times thing for me is I will just let things sometimes suck for so long to where there's just this fine line of, it's fine, I can deal with it, and just earth shattering. Like, there's just that fine line where I push it so hard and deal with that thing for so long. And that's essentially where I got to, because everything got bad. My relationship with my wife was bad. My relationship with myself was bad. My relationship with my family was bad. We were drinking tons and tons of alcohol every single night. My weight was terrible. We were broke all the time. Everything sucked. And it really got to the point where it was like, again, not a suicide thing, because like that never crossed my mind. It was just, I need to live a different way, or I don't want to. Like, I was essentially just going to go into social, mental, emotional, everything retreat and just completely shut down from the world, and probably would have ended up, something like homeless because we didn't pay the bills, and my wife would have ended up leaving me, and all these different things. It was like, either I make a massive change right now because this is what is coming. Or essentially, if I don't make a massive change right now, this is what is coming. So either life can stay as absolutely terrible as it is right now and get worse, which I just couldn't even fathom it being worse, or, to be completely blunt, shit needs to change right now in a really, really big way. Because that's the only thing that's going to, like, oh, maybe I'll lose 5 pounds and, maybe I'll drink just a little bit less. And it's like, no, like massive, massive changes across the board need to happen. Like the way you handle finance needs to change. The way you handle your health needs to change. The way you handle your relationships needs to change. Like, you have just gone down a super shell, preoccupied with what other people think mentality to, bleep the world, because I don't want to put anybody off with too much swearing, but bleep the world. I'll do whatever I want to do, regardless of the consequences, and no one can tell me otherwise mentality. Basically, complete opposite end of the spectrum. And there needs to be like a healthy medium somewhere, like not just for how the rest of the world sees you, but how you see you, because that really was the base of the problem. Was because and still to this day, like, I would like people to like me, and I like when people like me, and the more people that like me, the better. But ultimately, if you walk up to me today and say, Scott, I hate your face and I think that you're the worst person on the planet, I'm just probably going to be like, cool. And literally 30 seconds later, I'm not going to think about you anymore. So for me, what it really comes down to is what I thought about myself. And that was really what I guess you could call the pain was right now, I don't like a single thing about myself. I don't like what I do. Like, I liked the people that I worked with, and I liked how I was being paid well, but I'm not in love with my job. I'm not in love with myself. I'm not in love with my health. I'm not in love with my direction or lack thereof. Again, I'm not happy with my relationship with my wife. That's going down the drain. Like, I literally hated every single thing about myself. Like, it got to a point where it was like, I like about Scott, and then just like basically dead air. Like, that's what it got to, us. I just didn't like me anymore. And if you don't like you, that's a massive problem. Like, if you don't care what anybody else on the planet thinks, cool. But if you don't like you, things get bad and things get ugly. And that's where, we have people that end up, self-medicating and getting into hard drugs. And I mean, it just gets darker and darker and darker until the lights just go out. And there are so many people in my family that went down that road that was probably another turnoff, where I've got multiple drug addicts in my family, alcoholics in my family. And it was like, if I don't stop now, I'm going to go down the roads that I can't turn back from. Like, once you get addicted to things like heroin and all this stuff, like, you don't come back. Like, once you're that kind of an addict, you're an addict forever. You can be a recovering addict for the rest of your life and never use again, but you're an addict forever. So to sum up, that was what it was I got to a point where I didn't like a single thing about myself. And the only place that it could go other than getting better was the ultimate nasty of, complete mental, emotional shutdown, drug abuse. It was just like this. I know that this is the only thing that is at the end of this road that I'm on now. And I don't want that. I'd rather not continue to live than go there. So I have to go the other way. Like, it just became almost like a fight or flight response. It's like, oh my God, here I am. Like, I never thought that I would get here and it would get this bad, but I'm right here. And the worst case scenario, like, I've already got my hand on the door handle. Like, and if I don't stop, I'm going to turn the door and there I'm in and I can't get out. So it was literally kind of like again, like a fight or flight response. Like, there's no other option. You're either going down the drain that ultimately leads to drug addiction, alcohol abuse, and eventually death, or everything needs to change.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful because I feel like a lot of people that's going to resonate with, because if you're on that path, you know it,
Oh
and
yeah.
you can feel it. And I think it is so powerful to hear your story of having gone down that path and gone till like you had to make a decision. I mean, you were forced to make that decision, and then see how, I mean, you rocketed back up in such a positive, constructive, beautiful way to this amazing place that you are now. That is so freaking inspiring. That is amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. And really, I wish that human beings weren't this way. I really wish that we weren't. And more specifically, I really wish that I wasn't, but I'm human. And if you get to that point where you feel that pain and fear response, grab it and run with it. Because there's, other than arguably things like love, there's nothing else that's going to pull you farther faster than pain and fear. And people will say, well, I don't want to make a change because of fear, or I don't want to make a change because of pain. And it's like, well, if there's nothing that you love right now, what else are you going to do? Those are, psychologically speaking, if we talk to psychologists, those are the only two things that the human psyche does. We run towards pleasurable things and things that we love, and we run away from things that we fear that are painful. That's what human behavior is: going towards things we love and are pleasurable, and running away from things that we fear and are painful. And if you don't have anything that is pleasuring you in your life and that you enjoy and that you love, this is all that you've got. So you need to run with it until you've got the other thing.
Wow. So once you decided, okay, I'm doing it, I'm going all in a positive way, and I'm making all of these changes across the board, which I also think is tremendous insight, that you can't just lose 5 pounds and put another little Band-Aid on it,
No.
because it doesn't work. That's just delaying the inevitable, and it may not even delay it. They're making it to a point where you just can't delay it anymore. And it seems like that's really where you got to. When you decided to make those changes across the board, it started with your health, right? But how else did you take action to manifest those changes? And how else did those changes actually manifest?
So I can say with absolute certainty that I would not have turned my life around and lost that weight if I hadn't, because I didn't even do something like, I didn't stop drinking right away either. And that's another thing, is you can't do all of it at once. You can't go from eating nothing but processed foods, drinking like a fish, never exercising, doing nothing but watching TV and not doing any mental learning, and change all 5 of them at once. There's been crazy amounts of studies that you can look at, but making that many big changes at once, people just don't have enough willpower. There's always an exception to the rule, and there's always that one person that has that amazing story, like David. I can't remember what his name is, but the guy that ended up being a Marine, like the toughest guy on the planet, whatever his name is.
David Goggins, maybe?
There you go. David Goggins. There's those exceptions to the rule, but you can't change everything at once. And I know that for me, starting to exercise and getting obsessed with being mentally amped up all the time, you can't do it long term, because then you end up getting into problems like adrenal fatigue and so on. But for me, that was the least of my concerns. And so literally all the time, as often as I could, in the morning while I was drinking coffee, using the restroom, getting ready to go to work, getting ready to go to the gym, while at the gym, while I was at my job in YouTube videos, while I was on my drive home, literally I always had something motivational playing. And you get to a point where that eventually just becomes a distraction and it's not helpful for you anymore. But for me, it was almost like self brainwashing, where I didn't allow myself to hear anything other than massively motivational, over the top. Literally, I think that the best way to describe it is self brainwashing, where other than conversations and stuff that I had to have with people, like, coming home and interacting with my wife or talking to people at work, being in meetings, like, other than things that I absolutely had to do, I was reprogramming and brainwashing myself to where that becomes your mental state versus I can't be in a positive, motivated state if I'm not listening to this. Like, I basically used motivational videos, sound bites, whatever. YouTube is my best friend, to bridge that gap and be my mental state until I turned it into my own mental state, because that is where all of it is. I don't care how much you exercise. I don't care how much weight you lose. I don't care if you never touch a drop of alcohol again. I don't care if you get onto a perfect diet where you have perfect carbs, perfect protein, perfect fat. Like, if your mental state isn't there, who cares? And you're not going to be able to sustain any of those things if you don't have the mental state, because no matter how well you set yourself up, no matter how well you schedule, no matter how much you ratchet down your life, shit just goes wrong. And if you don't have the mental state to go through those bad parts, to, I'm in a good place, crappy thing happened, at the end of the crappy thing, still in a good place. Like, you have to have the mental strength and state of mind to survive that bad part, so that you don't just go, I'm living well, I'm making good changes, here's the sucky part, here's the end of the sucky part, now I'm just doing all the bad stuff again. Like, you have to have that strong mentality piece. And for me, the motivational videos are what did it for me. And that might not work for everybody else. And to be completely honest, at this point, if I hear motivationals anymore, I'm just like, ugh, like, I've heard this like a million times now. Like, I don't need to hear this again. I don't want to hear this again. But that's because that has become my internal dialogue now. Like, I don't have to hear it from the outside anymore, because it's become who I am now. So for me, again, it was the changing my mindset. And for me, the way that I did that was becoming obsessed with motivational videos. We're talking Eric Thomas / E.T., the hip hop preacher. We're talking Les Brown, Grant Cardone. We're talking, so many people. Like, if you type in motivational video on YouTube, you will find no short supply of videos to watch. Everything from minute and 30-second sound bites to 2-hour videos to literally 24/7 live streams where it's just video after video after video. So that for me is what got me through. And if I wouldn't have been obsessed with that, I just don't think I would have been able to sustain it, because I didn't have enough personal emotional energy to keep up the pace without that, jacking up my adrenaline levels, keeping me hyped up all the time. Like, I was so low that I had to have something that was dragging me up until this is where I was on my own, because I just didn't have the physical energy, emotional energy, mental toughness. I just couldn't survive it on my own without that stuff.
That is so powerful. And I love what you said about brainwashing yourself, or self-brainwashing, because, and I've talked to hundreds of entrepreneurs and people on this show, and, after a while you start to hear patterns in what the really successful people are saying, and the mindset that's clearly a top variable in the journey to success, or just living a life that you're happy with, and being happy and loving yourself. Because like you said, that inner monologue is definitely going on at all times, and so it's either eating away at you or it's building you up. And I think that that is so powerful that you got to a place where you were reprogramming that inner monologue. It's
Yeah,
huge.
I mean, because it was like, it sounds almost, I don't know if cheesy or corny is the word, or self-pity, boohoo, or anything like that, but I literally knew. And it's nice to be able to be super comfortable saying these things because I know that it's not me anymore. But even in those states where I was at my lowest, like I knew like somewhere inside of me, that teeny tiny little bit knew like, dude, you're broken right now. Like things are not working out. And if you don't fix yourself, like it's going to get bad and it's going to get ugly and you're literally just going to lose yourself. Like both my brothers are heroin addicts, and I can see what it looks like for somebody that's alive, but they're not. Like they're not really, obviously they're people, but they're not really a person anymore. Like the best way that I can describe it is when people ask me like, oh, how was seeing your brother or something like that? This is a really specific example. How was seeing your brother? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't really see him. Like I saw heroin today. I didn't see my brother. And it was just like, I knew that because I come from that kind of a family, because I know that I have an addictive personality, whether it's, I don't know, flavored water or kombucha or seeds or whatever, like whatever I bring into my life, I ingrain it as part of my life or it doesn't stay. And I knew that if I didn't quote unquote fix myself, that it was just going to go dark. So, I mean, the whole brainwashing, self-brainwashing thing in the mental state it's everything. You can't do anything else if your mind isn't right. Nothing. No business, health, relationships, self-relationships, none of it works if your mindset isn't right. So if you need to brainwash yourself, start brainwashing yourself. I don't know what it needs to be, but start brainwashing yourself because I don't know, it's just insane. With being able to look back, if I hadn't done that one thing, I know I've said that a lot. Like there was this turning point, that one thing, but without any of those pieces, I wouldn't be here. And the brainwashing, changing my mindset, making that who I was versus the bad who I was, none of it would have worked. Like I wouldn't have been able to do stuff like the 23-hour days that I was working when I was putting together my course. I wouldn't be able to do, when money gets tight, because entrepreneurs don't get a paycheck every 2 weeks that's the exact same amount all the time. I wouldn't be able to survive the we have just enough or not enough mentality. Like you can't survive those things without the tough mental state. So I don't know if it's you need to talk to your preacher. I don't know if it's you need to do the motivational thing. I don't know if it's you need to immerse yourself in volunteer work so that you can see how good you really have it. Like, I don't know what it is for you, but you've got to reprogram the way that you think and that you see the world if you're going to survive and grow in it.
How long did it take from when you first started to watch those videos until you were like, okay, I don't need this anymore? I'm a different person.
I think initially, like in the moment, you think that you're there like day one. Like as soon as you hear that video, because you're so jacked up on motivation videos, you're like, I'm a different person today. But I would say that maybe after a year, it started to become my personality, but the previous version was still just so strong that, even up until I stopped listening to motivationals probably 18 months ago or something like that. But even just until the last like 6 months where I came across some new information and changed even more ways that I think, there was still that stuff there. Like it doesn't, if you live your life a certain way until, like how old would I have been? 28. If you spend the first 28 years of your life living one way, like you're not going to change everything in 6 months. you can feel and be on this huge upward trend that entire time. But that's why they call it like a lifestyle change, and why people talk about, diets are terrible because they're this temporary thing. It's like, no, you need to change the way that you live, because you're not going to change overnight. So it was probably, I mean, just the first level of like, I can stay at a motivated state and not have to have a motivational video in my ear every second, at least, and I'm being really conservative, at least 6 months to a year, at least. Really, it took to where I started seeing massive results in the form of my weight loss, of, physical manifested results. Like, in the business world, it would be, I spent 6 months putting books out on Amazon and didn't make a single dollar. And then at the end of the 6 months, all of a sudden that one book hit and I made $500. It's like, you have to keep going until you start to see those results. And I know the see it to believe it thing is kind of like a BS mind state to be in, because you've really got to see it or believe it and then you'll see it. But when it comes to changing your mindset, that for me is when it really sunk in, was when I started to see results. 6 months down the road, it's like, holy cow, I've lost like 30 pounds. And then you'll pick up a 30-pound dumbbell or kettlebell or something at the gym and you'll go like, really? Like, for real? Or in the business world, like, you'll get you make that one business deal and it's $1,000 check, right? And it's like, well, wait a minute. This is one conversation. It was 45 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it was. It's like, it took me a month to make this much at this other job. Like, you have to keep going at it until you start seeing the results, in my opinion, before it really starts to sink in. Once you get past that, you get more into the believe it, then see it. But if you're that low and the world sucks and you hate everything, you hate yourself, like, it's that tangible feedback that's going to let you keep going and say, oh my God, this is actually working. Picking up that 30-pound kettlebell and going like, was I really carrying this around on my body every single day? And like, people have done studies like that where they'll put on like, okay, you lost 30 pounds. And they'll put this bodysuit on that equally distributes 30 pounds of weight. And they're exhausted by the end of the day. And they're like, oh my God, like, no wonder I felt like crap and didn't do anything and all this other stuff, because you realize how much baggage you've left behind. So to come back to your question, at least a year before it started becoming my real state of going for results. It was at least a year.
Wow. And how did you maintain that level of commitment? I mean, how did you stay on track that whole time?
Again, it comes back to the whole, I know it's kind of like looking at two different paths, really. Like, literally, like picturing a path, like we were talking about earlier. You're hiking, right? Over here, it's downhill and it's an easy one, but at the end, it's like, this is really dramatic, but at the bottom of the hill is like boiling tar and metal spikes and bugs and just nastiness, right? I don't like hate bugs or anything, but I'm just picturing like mosquitoes and scorpions and all these nasty stuff. Or over here on the other side, where it's rocky, it's rough, and it's nothing but uphill and climbing essentially the entire time. But the good stuff that you want is at the top of it. It really just comes down to like, I don't have another choice. Like, I know what is over here and I don't want it. And I can't do that because I know what's at the end of that road. And so it literally is kind of I don't have a choice. It really comes down to kind of like the being fed up. Like, Tony Robbins has said this before, like, people don't change when they, and I'm paraphrasing here because I'm sure I'm going to say it wrong, but people don't change when they want things. They change when things become like musts. Like, I have had enough. Like, this must happen. And, the must and have to are really relative terms because you don't have to do anything except for lay there and breathe in oxygen and take in calories, right? But when it gets to that point where I know what the other option is, that's a non-option. This is what I have to do. This is what I must do. And so at that point, it really just it doesn't become, how do I stay motivated? It becomes, as ugly as it sounds, it becomes, how do I survive and get through this? Because it's my only option. Like right now, I'm sure that I could go out, stop doing this whole entrepreneur thing, get a decent paying job, and have 1,000 times less initially, 1,000 times less things to stress about, and live a fairly, as far as money goes and stuff, a fairly comfortable life. But for me, it's a non-option. It's a no. Like, I don't want somebody telling me what to do for my entire life. I don't want to essentially be under somebody's thumb. I don't want somebody telling me when I can and can't do things. I don't want my kids to feel limited on what they can or can't do as far as college or anything else goes. I don't want to be limited on what I can or can't do. Like that road, because it has a massive ceiling, a massive cap, and very limited options, it's a no. It's a non-option. I know what's at the bottom of this boiling oil, spikes and bugs and scorpions road, which might be fine for everybody else, but it's a non-option. So as much as sometimes this blatantly, and any entrepreneur that tells you that it doesn't suck sometimes is lying to you. As much as this sucks and as hard as it is sometimes, it's the only option. So it's like, how do I survive and get through this to get to the next level? And there will always be another level. Like when I started, I was just like, if I can just make $1,000 a month, then everything will be great and the world will be beautiful and I won't have a boss and I'll be carefree and set for the rest of life. And then you go, I'm making $1,000 a month now. There's still a whole lot of strings tied to me. I don't have any real options. Like there's always going to be another level to go to. And when you become obsessed with getting results like you do doing this kind of stuff, it just becomes, how do I survive and get through this? So to kind of come back and answer the question of how do you stay motivated? You have to be doing something because it's what you must do. Like, for me, again, it was either I change my life or my life essentially ends. Like I might not die today. I might not die even in the next 10 years, but my life will be over. I'll be a drunk, or I'll be an addict, or I'll be a drunk and an addict. I'll be alone because my wife will probably leave me. I mean, like, it becomes a non-option. So that is where the motivation comes from, is this has to happen. I mean, like you hear stories all the time of people doing insane things that they never thought they could do, like people getting lost in the woods and all that kind of stuff. And it always comes down to, well, the other option is laying here with this broken leg and dying in the middle of the woods, or I crawl out of here and crawl, 5 miles. I remember the story of this woman who fell off this little tiny mini cliff and essentially broke her leg and was bleeding internally. And she knew that she was. And I was like, there's no way anybody's going to find me here. Every time that I move, my entire body screams with pain. But it's either that or I do this really sucky thing and I live. Like, that's where it has to be. So you can't just go into some huge change like this and say, I think I want to do this. Like, it has to be your must. Like, I have to do this. Like, going through your finance degree, like, this is something for me that I have to do. Or, I don't know, some dad that finds out, or some guy finds out that he's going to have a kid because his girlfriend comes home and says that she's pregnant. And he's like, I have to get a better job, or I have to stop drinking, or I have to fix my relationship with my spouse, girlfriend, whatever. Like, it's the musts that keep you motivated, not the wants. It's the needs, the musts, the have tos.
Well, I just want to I just want to say I think that year of listening to motivational videos definitely rubbed off on you because that was very empowering, and and I think that is so spot on. Of there is no other option. I mean, this is like that's like the old the old tale of the general who burned the ships. You can't go home. You can only win. Either you win or you get tossed in the ocean. And I just think that is so powerful of a mentality. I'm studying John D. Rockefeller right now, and what was so interesting was that he had a very Baptist upbringing, a very strong Baptist influence in his life, and it got to a point where he felt like it was his moral and ethical and religious obligation to make money and to acquire wealth. Like that was not just what he wanted. That was an imperative for him. That was like that was the reason that he was put on this earth, was to do that. And because of it, I mean, he became one of the most successful people in the history of the world.
Yep.
But it's because that was a must for him.
There you go.
So you made this incredible transformation. Where did the love of animals and dogs come from? And how did you realize? I know you talked about D1, making that comment to you, but where did that come from, really?
So I think that, and I'm sure that if a psychologist listened to this, they'd have all kinds of things to say about it. But because we were on, food stamps and state assisted living, like the state essentially always told us, like, this is the place that we found for you guys that has the right amount of rooms and all this kind of stuff. And it was always, no pets allowed type places. And so whether you ask my mom, whether you asked my dad, I was always that kid that like wanted a dog, but we could never have one because of where we lived. And, once I got out of high school and stuff, like I already told you, went out to Alaska, was in situations where it wasn't even sort of kind of an option to have a dog, because you can't do that. Like I'm sure some people do, but for me it was a non-option because the dog wasn't going to be the thing that sat in the backyard in the 6x6 cage, aka prison as I call it. But it was going to be a member of the family, or it wasn't going to be there. And so finally it got to a place where we got into our lives of, I want a dog. Like I live on my own now. You and I are together, right now, fiance, Ariane, now wife, let's get a dog. And so I started researching, what breed do I want? All the things. And I started looking into it. And I was like, okay, I've decided on this breed. I like German Shepherds. And so then I started looking at breeders and like, oh, these people are close, or these are super far away, or these guys do stuff I don't like, or these guys don't do the hip and elbow tests to make sure these aren't going to be, medically broken dogs essentially, and they're just breeding dogs to make money, like all the things. And I ended up finding a breeder that I really liked that was in Utah where I was. She was on the opposite end of Utah, but she was still in Utah. And just happenstance where we were close to the point where it's kind of funny. Looking back, another turnaround, another turning point of massively different life. As far as dogs go, I think that this was the turning point where we had done this research. We had looked at what breed we wanted. We had found a breeder that we liked, but money was tough. And so I was like, well, I did this Alaska thing for so long. And if we go, we don't have to really pay rent. We have meals provided to us. It was kind of like being in the military, but not. Like, because you go, you get dorms assigned to you. You have meals, 3 meals provided every single day. And there's like a mess hall you can go to in between that has simple stuff like, bagels and bread and all this kind of stuff, cereal. And we can go and we can save up a bunch of money because we won't have these expenses that we normally have, like rent and food and everything else. And we had applied for the jobs at the same place for the same company, applied for the jobs, got them. She was going to be a barista and I was going to be a bouncer at the bar. And like a week before we were supposed to leave, and our flights had they pay for your flight out there too to get you out there. Our flights had already been paid for and everything. And then the breeder calls me and she's like, I have this dog. I don't have this dog, but there's this dog who is, I think he was 9 months old at the time, 10 months old. The original owners that bought him from me can't keep him anymore. And we basically don't know what to do with him. Like, cause they had him for a few months and then he basically spent 3 or 4 months on the side of their friend's house in his kennel and only got let out to go to the bathroom. And it was not a good living situation. Like when we got his kennel, which we still have today, which we use for his younger brother, I thought that it was completely rusted out because the entire thing was brown. But literally from top to bottom, it was covered in mud, which meant he was too the entire time. So she calls and she's like, I have this dog. I know that you've been wanting one of our dogs. Do you want him? And I was like, well, okay, let me go and talk to the wife or the fiance at the time. And I was like, okay, well, we can either take this dog that we've been wanting to have for a really long time for way less than what we would have paid for him as a puppy, or we go to Alaska and, go down this completely different road. And we ended up going with getting Vulcan. And that's where just all of it started. As soon as we knew that we were getting him, it was like, okay, what food do I feed him? The classic stuff. What's the best leash? What's the best collar? What's the best dog food bowl? And eventually we got to what do I feed him? What do I feed this dog? And of course he came with like half of a bag of food and we fed him that for a while. But to this day, I will be forever grateful for this. I was in a German Shepherd Facebook group saying, what does everybody feed their German Shepherds? And somebody said, have you considered raw feeding? And Vivian Miller, I will love you forever. Out in Scotland. And then I was like, what is raw feeding? And I just went down the rabbit hole. I mean, so much research. And I'm kind of messing up the timeline because I started looking into this before we actually got contacted with Vulcan. So it was almost a year of research on raw feeding before we got him. And he was with us for a couple months. And then we finally switched him onto raw foods. So it was this huge, long journey of learning about it. And in 2014, the company that I worked for developed apps for school districts. And so we had access because they were kind of like, they basically used us as kind of like guinea pig problem testers in a way where they're like, you can make an app for whatever you want. Do you have on the side photography business? Use our stuff to make yourself an app that you can put onto the marketplace. And basically they used it as like, oh, well, Jason made his photography app and it had this problem. And they're like, okay, well, how do we fix it so that we can fix it for a client fast or avoid it breaking for a client at all ever? And I ended up making a raw feeding app in 2014, and it took me like 150 hours of just on my own personal time, learning how to use our software to build the app, learning how to do art stuff and use, like photo editing software and just all kinds of things. And this was all before the weight loss transformation or anything. So this was almost like this little nugget in the past that gave me validation later on because, fast forward through all the weight loss stuff and everything, the first year of putting out books that I didn't care about. And one conversation with another friend of ours, Jordan Miller, he was like, dude, do you like this gluten-free stuff? I was like, no, dude. He's like, well, then why are you doing it? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I thought I could make some money doing it. And he's like, well, what do you care about? And I was like, well, the only things that I really care about are my wife and my dogs. And he's like, okay. And then that conversation with Dion happened, I think, either later that day or the next day. And I just had this kind of like, I obviously care about this because this app that I put out, it was a free app. So it was just I was putting the information out there because I felt like it was the information that people needed to know so that they could avoid all the bad things that come with kibble, like 1 in 2 dogs in the United States getting cancer because of kibble. 1 in 2, 50%. It's insane. 35 to 50% sugar and carbohydrates, dogs living way shorter amounts of time. Like Great Danes in the 70s used to be 17, 18 years old was average. Now it's 7 or 8. If you have an 8-year-old Great Dane, you have a senior Great Dane now. So I just put out all this information for free because I felt like it was what like the world needed it. Like, I have this information. Here, you guys have it. And then I dipped my toe into the business world with the Kindle books in 2016 again, had that conversation with Jordan, had that conversation with B1. And it was like, why am I not doing this? Like, cause I can't do this gluten-free thing anymore. Like, I would rather you took a pair of pliers and ripped one of my fingernails off than have to write another gluten-free fitness book. Like, no, I'm not doing it. Never again. And the funny thing was, the first book that I put out, I've actually got it right here. The first book that I put out was a dog book, and it was not even really a book. It's like, but I was like, oh, I don't want to do that because I'm too passionate about dogs and it'll get too heated. Basically, I abandoned passion to go after something that I thought could make me some more money. And a year later, wanted to slap myself in the face because I should have been doing that all along. Like, I should have been putting out books that I was passionate about the entire time. And I mean, really, it just snowballed from there. Was, how the course conversation with D1 to how else can I put this information out there? I repurposed that Facebook group that was originally for my app that had like 400 people in it and turned it into 24,000 once I switched gears and was like, this is the Raw Feeding 101 group, which is, like essentially my brand, Raw Feeding 101. And it snowballed from there. Everything, the consultations, the course, the book, the boot camps. Now all of it was from, none of it would have happened if we would have decided to go to Alaska and wouldn't have gotten Wolken. None of it would have happened because I don't even know where we would have gone, but it wouldn't have been having a dog for, the last 9-ish years. It just wouldn't have happened.
That is, once again, absolutely incredible. And that, like, I'm such a firm believer that life happens for us, not to us. I feel like that is just incredible evidence for that. I mean, like, what was it? 4 days before you left on that flight?
It was less than a week. Flights were planned. We had already started packing. Like, we were already making jokes and like, calling each other like, hey, barista, would you make me some coffee? And hey, bouncer, I need you to do this for me. Like, it was just, we were already in Alaska doing these jobs. And then this phone call came through and it was like, we have a really big decision to make. Like, it sounds so, like, to a lot of people, I'm sure it sounds so dumb. Like, getting a dog was this big, massive, life-changing event. But for us, it made everything different. I mean, they've become like this huge part of our lives, a huge amount of glue in our relationship. I mean, everything. I mean, Wolken's paws, actual imprints of their paws on my wrist along with my wife's initial. I mean, like, they're everything. The closest thing I have to kids right now. They're my business, my life, my passion, my fun, my love, like everything. And none of it would have happened if we would have been like, let's go and play bouncer and barista.
Well, that is incredible. That is absolutely incredible. And, Scott, I do want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm so glad the conversation went to where it has. Definitely not planned.
No plan whatsoever on this call. Just like, let's go. Let's see where it goes.
That's awesome. So thank you again so much for coming on the show and for sharing your time with me, because your time's very valuable. So I just want to say thank you.
And thank you for having me, because your time is not any less valuable. I'll leave you guys with that, maybe, is Your time is the most valuable thing you have. Another super cliche thing that you'll hear 1,000 times in most motivational videos, but it really, really is. And if you want to start, other than your mindset, if you want to start one place, look at your day. How do I spend my day? How much of it is towards productivity and bettering my life, and how much of it is towards harming my life or doing absolutely nothing? Like if you spend more time on Facebook and Netflix than you do trying to better your life, you're going to do more harm and or nothing to your life than improve it. So I guess that's a parting thing. You didn't ask me for a parting thing, but look at your time. How do you spend your day? What do you do with your day?
Well, I love that. And I actually do now want to ask for a slightly different parting thing. I'm 24, and we've known each other for a while now, but I just kind of want to put it on the record so that it makes more context for people who are listening, who maybe this is their first episode that they've joined the fun. And if this is your first episode, make sure you come back. So, but anyway, so I'm 24, and this is a very personal question. But what question should I be asking you that I just wouldn't think to ask?
I don't know how to form this into a question for you, but okay, here's a question. Here's the way to form it into a question is, how should I be framing what I'm doing right now? Would be the question. Like, I'm Ben. Scott, how should I be framing what I'm doing? And it would be starting with 2 books, Start with Why and Find Your Why. Because unfortunately, a lot of people end up living their lives based on their whats instead of their whys. And if we just want to consider all of it, the Kindle stuff, the dog stuff now, I'm 3 years in, and not 2 weeks ago have I finally figured out the actual why for what I do. And because ultimately, and your why is going to come in multiple different forms. So you're going to have a personal why, and it sounds, this is a way. Okay, so to give an example, really specific example, my personal why is to create successful business or businesses that allow me to have options and live the way that I want to live my life, so that I don't have to end up in the same place that I started. That's my personal why, is to create successful businesses so that I can live the way that I want. And I don't care about Lambos. I'm just saying live the lifestyle that I want and have options so that I don't have to live a life without options. Essentially, that's my why. My business's why is to essentially create transformation for dog owners. The base why being to transform dog owners into raw feeders so that they can have longer, happier, healthier lives with their dogs, or from their dogs. Their dogs living happier, healthier, longer lives. So if we look at it that way, there's the level why, how, and what. And this is why you guys need to read this book. But my why is that living a life with successful businesses so that I have options. And how I do that is with Raw Feeding 101 and Dog Dad Official. And it has its own why. So I don't think that you guys will be able to sustain any type of long-term effort without looking at what your why is. And it needs to go, I really recommend at least reading Start with Why, so you can get this concept, because it's not, I don't want to have a boss. Like, that's cool, but that's not a why. And people say, this is an example from the book, people say, well, some people do things just for money. It's like, no, the The money is the what. The money is maybe even the how, but it's not the why. Somebody that lives their life exclusively to make money is doing it because they need to be better. They need to feel better than everybody else because their lack of money has made them feel less than everyone else. Or it's their way of competing with the rest of the world. Or it's what allows them to be, big philanthropists or whatever it is. But if you think that you know what your why is, I would challenge you to read or listen to, which is what I did. I do much better with audiobooks. Listen to or read Start With Why, and I can almost guarantee you that it goes deeper, because I thought that my why was to own a raw feeding dog business and teach people how to change their dogs over to raw food and make some money doing it. Turns out that's not the case. My why is much different than my business's why, and they're very different things. And you'll find out that you can have a much richer experience with life if you really understand what your why is, but you've got to ask yourself the right questions and feel really uncomfortable a little bit doing it. To find mine and actually go through this process, I literally over here sat and looked at my whiteboard and wrote it out for almost 2 hours, erasing and changing because it just didn't feel right. Erasing and change, erasing and change, erasing and change, to where I could say it and go, that is it. So for me, it doesn't feel any more right than saying, I want to create successful businesses that allow me to have options and not feel restricted in the way that I live my life. I have no interest in Lamborghinis. I have no interest in mansions. It's just not my thing. I just want options. If my kids want to play beach bums and be a professional surfer for the rest of their life, then I want to allow them to do that. If they want to go and get a finance degree, I want to allow them to do that. If my wife wants to go and be a nurse tomorrow, I want her to be able to go and do that without having to worry about the time and the money. If I want to, this is a really specific example. My dogs got really sick from bacterial infection from eating cow pies a couple of weeks back. And I got to take 5 days off and not work and not ask anybody's permission for it. Like, those are the kinds of things that are the basis of my why. So I'd really challenge you guys to read, Start With Why, because I almost guarantee you that your why isn't what you think that it is.
And on that note, let's wrap up this bad boy, because that was awesome. So thank you very much again, Scott, and to everybody who's watching and listening. I want to thank y'all very, very much. Your time is very valuable as well, so I'm very grateful that you would choose to share it with us today. So thank you very much. Thank you again, Scott, and I will see y'all on the next episode. Take care now.